Imagine walking into a store late at night and spotting a young girl all alone, clutching a pack of diapers. No one around her, no explanation, just silence and questions. Why is she here? Where is her family? And what dark secrets lie hidden behind her quiet gaze? Stay with us to uncover a story of courage, compassion, and hope that will leave you speechless. If this story moves you, leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for more incredible stories that inspire. Duane Johnson had just finished a late-night training session and was driving back to his hotel. The road was quiet, the streetlights creating long shadows over the empty asphalt. As he drove, his car's dashboard lit up with a warning light, signaling an issue with the vehicle. Duane frowned, pulling over to the side of the road. He stepped out of the car, the cool night air brushing against his skin, and inspected the situation. Unable to fix the problem himself, he decided to find help. He noticed the glowing sign of a nearby Walmart and decided to walk over, hoping to find a phone charger or assistance. As he approached the store, he noticed the emptiness of the parking lot, save for a few scattered vehicles. The automatic doors hissed open, and the sterile fluorescent lights greeted him. Inside, the store was nearly deserted, with only a few employees preparing to close for the night. While scanning the aisles for a power bank, something caught his attention. A small girl, no older than 6 or 7, was standing alone in the diaper section. She was wearing an oversized hoodie and sandals that looked too big for her. Her hair was messy, and she carried a crumpled dollar bill in her tiny hand. She appeared to be struggling to reach a pack of diapers from the top shelf. Duane's instincts kicked in. Concerned for the child, he approached cautiously so as not to startle her. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice low. The girl turned, her wide, wary eyes meeting his. "Are you okay? Where's your family?" The girl didn't respond, clutching the dollar bill tighter. Duane crouched to her level, softening his tone further. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Do you need help?" Still silent, the girl pointed toward the pack of diapers she had been reaching for. Duane nodded, grabbing it off the shelf and handing it to her. She held it close to her chest and looked down at the ground, avoiding his gaze. He noticed her bare legs were covered in faint bruises and scratches, which only deepened his concern. Duane scanned the store, looking for an adult who might be with her, but the aisles were empty. He glanced at the time. It was nearly 11 p.m. It struck him as odd and troubling that a child would be alone, buying diapers at this hour. He decided to observe from a distance, wanting to ensure she wasn't in immediate danger. As the girl shuffled to the register, she placed the diapers on the counter and handed the cashier her crumpled bill. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, frowned apologetically. "Sweetheart, this isn't enough," she said gently. The girl's face fell and she clutched the dollar tightly, her small frame trembling. Duane couldn't stand by any longer. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the counter. "I'll cover it," he said firmly, pulling out his wallet. The cashier looked up, startled, and then recognition dawned on her face. "Oh my God, are you?" she began, but Duane shook his head slightly, signaling her to keep quiet. He paid for the diapers, and the girl clutched the bag tightly, giving him a shy nod of thanks. Duane knelt beside her again. "Where's your family? Can I help you get home?" he asked softly. This time the girl hesitated before pointing toward the store's exit. Duane decided to follow her from a distance, ensuring she got home safely. The girl led him down the street to a run-down neighborhood. The houses were small, many of them with broken windows or boarded-up doors. She stopped in front of one particularly dilapidated house, the porch light flickering faintly. Without looking back, she climbed the steps and disappeared inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. Duane hesitated. He could hear faint cries from within the house, followed by the girl's voice trying to soothe someone. His curiosity and concern got the better of him. Peeking through the open door, he saw the girl gently rocking a toddler, no older than 2, in her arms. The toddler was crying softly, wearing nothing but a diaper. The sight broke Duane's heart. It was clear these children were alone and trying to fend for themselves. He stepped back, leaning against the porch railing, his mind racing. Should he call the authorities? Try to speak with the parents if they were even around? Determined to help, Duane decided to head back to Walmart to buy food and supplies for the children. As he walked back toward the store, his phone buzzed, the battery almost dead. He ignored it, his focus solely on the 2 children he had just encountered. Whatever was going on, he couldn't just walk away. Something wasn't right, and he was going to find out what it was. He returned to the house an hour later with bags of groceries and supplies, including fresh diapers and snacks. Knocking softly on the door, he waited for a response. The little girl opened it cautiously, her eyes widening when she saw the bags in his hands. She didn't speak, but stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Inside, the home was in disarray. Dirty dishes filled the sink, and clothes were strewn across the floor. The air was heavy with the smell of neglect. Duane placed the bags on the counter and turned to the girl. "Where's your mom or dad?" he asked gently. The girl shook her head, looking down at the floor. "Mommy's not here," she said softly. "She went out. She always goes out." Duane's chest tightened. It was clear these children were being left alone for extended periods. He glanced at the toddler, who was now nibbling on a piece of bread from the bag he had brought. The little boy looked up at him with wide, curious eyes, a faint smile forming on his face. Duane knew he couldn't leave them like this. Pulling out his phone, he dialed the local police, explaining the situation. "There are 2 young children left alone in a dangerous environment," he said, his voice firm. "They need help." As he ended the call, the little girl tugged at his sleeve. "Are you going to take us away?" she asked, her voice trembling. Duane knelt down, meeting her gaze. "I'm here to help you," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore." The sound of approaching sirens filled the night air. Duane stayed with the children, offering comfort as they waited. He knew this was only the beginning of a long night, and possibly a much longer journey, but he was determined to see it through. When the police arrived, Duane stepped outside to speak with them, explaining everything he had seen and heard. The officers assured him they would handle the situation, but as they prepared to take the children to safety, Duane felt a pang of guilt. The little girl clung to his leg, her eyes filled with fear. "Don't leave," she whispered. Duane crouched down, looking her in the eye. "I'll be here for you," he promised. "I won't let anything bad happen to you." As the children were placed in the care of social services, Duane made a silent vow. He wouldn't just walk away. These kids deserved more, and he was going to make sure they got it. Duane Johnson stood outside the small, dilapidated house as the police carefully escorted the 2 children to a waiting squad car. The little girl, whom he now knew was named Lila, clung tightly to her brother June. Her wide, fearful eyes darted between Duane and the officers as if silently pleading for reassurance. Duane crouched to her level one last time before they were taken away. "You're going to be safe," he told her gently. "These officers will take good care of you. I'll check on you soon, I promise." Lila nodded reluctantly, her small hand gripping the hem of his jacket until an officer gently guided her toward the car. As the car pulled away, Duane felt a surge of determination. He couldn't shake the image of the children in that neglected house, struggling to survive. His mind raced with questions about their parents and the circumstances that led to this moment. He knew he had to follow through on his promise to help. After exchanging contact information with the officers, Duane returned to his own car. He called a friend who worked with a child advocacy organization, quickly explaining the situation. "These kids need immediate support," he said firmly. "What can I do to make sure they're safe tonight?" His friend assured him that the children would likely be placed in emergency foster care, but Duane wasn't satisfied with just leaving it at that. He needed to know more. With a deep breath, he made his way to the local police station, determined to stay involved. When he arrived, the station buzzed with activity, but an officer recognized him and escorted him to a quieter area. Duane recounted everything he'd seen that night, from the moment he spotted Lila alone in Walmart to finding the children fending for themselves. The officer listened carefully, nodding as Duane spoke. "We've already sent a team to investigate the house," she explained. "We'll be working with social services to ensure these kids are placed somewhere safe while we locate their parents. Based on what you've described, it sounds like there may be neglect or even abandonment involved." Duane felt a wave of anger and frustration at the thought of anyone leaving children in such dire conditions. "Is there any way I can help directly?" he asked. "I want to make sure they're okay." The officer hesitated. "Mr. Johnson, I appreciate your willingness to get involved, but these cases are complicated. Once the system takes over, it's usually best to let professionals handle it." Duane shook his head. "I understand, but I'm not walking away. If there's anything I can do, whether it's supporting them financially, connecting them with resources, or just being there for them, I want to help." The officer seemed moved by his sincerity. "Let me speak with the social worker handling their case," she said. "We can't make any promises, but I'll see what we can do." Duane waited as the officer made a call. He used the time to check his phone, scrolling through messages from his team, reminding him about his filming schedule. He sighed, knowing he'd need to make some adjustments. This situation was far more important than any project. When the officer returned, she had a name and a location for him. Rachel Nannis, a social worker based in the city who was handling the children's case. "She's heading to meet them now at the emergency care center," the officer said. "If you want to meet her, I can give you directions." "Absolutely," Duane replied without hesitation. As he drove to the care center, his mind replayed Lila's small voice asking for help, her courage in protecting her brother, and the heartbreak in her eyes when she realized she was being taken away. He couldn't stop thinking about the life these children must have endured, and he vowed to do whatever it took to make it better. When he arrived at the care center, Rachel was already there, speaking with the staff. She was a calm and composed woman in her early 40s, her eyes betraying a deep empathy for the children she worked with. Duane introduced himself, and Rachel's expression shifted from surprise to gratitude as he explained his involvement. "It's rare to see someone step up like this," she said, leading him to a private room where Lila and June were being cared for. "They're safe here for now, but we'll need to figure out a longer-term solution." In the room, Lila sat on a small cot, cradling her brother, who had fallen asleep in her lap. She looked up as Duane entered, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "You came," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Duane crouched beside her, keeping his voice low and gentle. "Of course I did," he said. "I told you I'd be here." Rachel watched the interaction, clearly impressed by the trust Lila had in him. "Mr. Johnson, I'll need to ask her some questions to understand their situation better," she said. "You're welcome to stay, but it might be difficult for her to talk about." Duane nodded. "If it helps her, I'll stay." Rachel began her gentle questioning, asking Lila about her family, her home, and how she ended up at Walmart. Lila explained in halting sentences that her mother was often gone for days, leaving her to care for June. "Mommy said she'd be back," she murmured, clutching Duane's hand tightly. "But she didn't come." Rachel's expression was somber as she took notes. Duane felt his heart break anew with each word Lila spoke. The weight of her responsibilities at such a young age was staggering. When the questioning ended, Rachel excused herself to make arrangements for the next steps. Left alone with the children, Duane focused on reassuring Lila. "Rachel is going to help you," he said softly. "And I'll be here too. You're not alone anymore." Lila's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, her small hand still gripping his. "Will you find Mommy?" she asked, her voice trembling. Duane hesitated. "We'll do everything we can," he promised. "Right now, the most important thing is making sure you and June are safe." As the night turned into early morning, Duane knew the journey ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it. This wasn't just a passing moment of kindness. It was a commitment to ensuring a brighter future for two children who had already endured so much. Duane Johnson arrived at the police station early the next morning, a mix of determination and anxiety etched across his face. The night's events had left him restless, his thoughts consumed by Lila and June's precarious situation. As he stepped through the station doors, the steady hum of activity surrounded him. Phones ringing, officers conferring, and the occasional clatter of filing cabinets. Duane was ushered into a private meeting room where Detective Martinez, the officer handling the case, awaited him. Detective Martinez, a composed woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted Duane with a firm handshake. "Mr. Johnson," she began, her tone respectful but serious. "Thank you for coming back. We've made progress overnight." Duane nodded, taking a seat across from her. "What's the update? How are Lila and June holding up?" Martinez adjusted her glasses and glanced at her notes. "The children are safe and in temporary care at the facility you visited. However, their mother, Catherine Holson, has been located. She was arrested early this morning with her partner, Dennis Clark, during a raid on a known drug den. The details are troubling." Duane's jaw tightened. "What do you mean by troubling?" Martinez hesitated before continuing. "When we apprehended them, we found evidence of narcotics activity. Dennis appears to have been dealing, and there's reason to believe Catherine was involved, though we're still determining the extent of her role. More disturbingly, we found items belonging to the children in the same environment, including Lila's teddy bear. That raises serious questions about the conditions these kids were living in." Duane's stomach sank at the mention of Lila's bear. The cherished toy had been a source of comfort for the young girl, and its presence in such a setting spoke volumes about what the children might have endured. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. Martinez sighed. "We'll be pressing charges against Dennis. As for Catherine, she's being held for questioning. If she's found complicit in endangering the children, she could lose her parental rights entirely. A hearing will be scheduled to determine their custody." Duane leaned forward, his hands clasped together tightly. What can I do to help these kids? They've been through enough. I don't want them to be stuck in the system without a real shot at a stable life. Martinez studied him for a moment before responding. The best thing you can do right now is continue supporting them. Your involvement could be invaluable when it comes to advocating for their best interests during the custody hearing. If you're willing, I can connect you with a family lawyer who specializes in cases like this. Absolutely, Duane replied without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Martinez nodded, a hint of respect softening her stern demeanor. I'll arrange that. In the meantime, I suggest you visit Catherine. She's asked to speak with you. She claims she has information that might change how we see her role in all of this. Duane's brow furrowed in surprise. She wants to talk to me? Why? I think she sees you as someone who might understand her better than the rest of us, Martinez said. It's not uncommon for people in her position to reach out to someone they perceive as impartial or compassionate. After a brief pause, Duane agreed to the meeting. Martinez led him down a series of hallways to an interview room where Catherine was being held. Through the glass, he saw a frail woman with disheveled hair and haunted eyes sitting at the table. She looked up as he entered, her expression a mix of shame and desperation. Mr. Johnson, she began, her voice trembling. Thank you for coming. I don't even know where to start. Duane sat across from her, his imposing presence softened by his genuine concern. Start wherever you need to, Catherine, he said gently. I'm here to listen. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes as she recounted her story. She spoke of her husband, Gerald, who had died in a tragic accident shortly after June's birth, leaving her with 2 young children and mounting debts. She described the downward spiral that followed: eviction, homelessness, and eventually meeting Dennis, who had promised stability but only brought chaos. I didn't want this life for my kids, she said, her voice breaking. I tried to keep them safe, but I failed. I didn't know what else to do. Duane listened intently, his heart aching as Catherine bared her soul. It sounds like you've been through hell, he said finally. But Catherine, your kids need you to be better now. They deserve a stable home and a mother who's there for them. Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face. I want to change. I'll do whatever it takes to get clean, to prove I can be a good mother again. I believe you, Duane said, his voice steady, but actions speak louder than words. Are you ready to fight for them, no matter how hard it gets? Catherine met his gaze, her expression firm despite her tears. Yes, she said, I'll do whatever it takes. Duane left the room with a newfound sense of purpose. Back in the hallway, he reconnected with Martinez, who was reviewing a new set of reports. How did it go? She asked. I think she's sincere, Duane replied, but she's going to need a lot of help to turn things around. Martinez nodded. We'll see what the court decides. In the meantime, I'll get you connected with the family lawyer and keep you updated on the investigation. As Duane left the station, his phone buzzed with a message from Rachel, the social worker. The children were asking for him, she said. Without a second thought, Duane headed toward the care facility, ready to face the next step in this unfolding journey. He knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but he was determined to see it through for Lila, June, and even Catherine. They deserved a chance at a better life, and Duane was resolved to help them find it. Duane arrived at Sunnybrook Children's Home just before noon, his heart heavy with the weight of the morning's revelations. The sprawling Victorian building stood out against the bright midday sky, its welcoming appearance contrasting sharply with the turmoil he felt inside. As he walked up the steps, the sound of children's laughter drifted through the air, a brief reminder of innocence amidst the chaos. Inside, Rachel greeted him with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She motioned him towards the small lounge where Lila and June were waiting. When Duane entered, Lila's face lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. "You came back," she exclaimed, rushing toward him and wrapping her arms tightly around his legs. June followed, toddling over with a soft giggle and reaching his tiny arms up for a hug. Duane knelt to their level, pulling them both into his arms and holding them close. "Of course I came back," he said softly. "I told you I'd always come back, didn't I?" Rachel joined them in the room, carrying a small tray with juice boxes and crackers. She placed it on the low table before sitting across from Duane. "The kids have been asking about their mother," Rachel said gently. "They're worried, especially Lila." Duane nodded, his hand gently stroking Lila's hair as she leaned against him. "I spoke to your mom today," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "She's safe, and she's going to work really hard to make things better for you and June." Lila's big brown eyes looked up at him, filled with both hope and uncertainty. "When can we see her?" she asked softly. "I miss her." Duane exchanged a glance with Rachel, who nodded subtly. "We're going to visit her soon," he promised. "But for now, I need you to be brave and take care of June. Can you do that for me?" Lila nodded solemnly, her small shoulders squaring as if she were accepting a great responsibility. "I'll be brave," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. Rachel began discussing the logistics of the custody hearing scheduled for the following week. The court will be reviewing the charges against Catherine and the conditions of her home. The evidence found in Dennis's possession will likely help her case, but it's going to be a long process. Duane frowned, his jaw tightening. "What happens to the kids in the meantime?" "They'll stay here at Sunnybrook," Rachel explained. "It's a good place for them, but long-term foster care isn't ideal. They need stability, and that can only come from either Catherine or another permanent arrangement." The thought of Lila and June being separated or shuffled around the system made Duane's chest tighten. He glanced down at the children, who were now quietly nibbling on crackers. "They deserve better than this," he said, his voice low but firm. "Whatever it takes, I'm going to make sure they have a chance at a real future." Rachel smiled faintly. "You've already done so much, Duane. Your presence alone is making difference." Duane spent the rest of the afternoon with the children, playing with Lila's dolls and helping June build block towers that he gleefully knocked down moments later. For a few brief hours, the heavy weight of their circumstances seemed to lift, replaced by the simple joys of childhood. But as the sun began to set and the shadows grew longer, the reality of the situation crept back in. As he prepared to leave, Lila clung to him tightly. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice small and pleading. Duane knelt down, his large hands gently resting on her tiny shoulders. "I have to go for a little while, Lila," he said softly, "but I'll be back, I promise." "You always keep your promises," she said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "That's right," Duane replied with a warm smile. "You can count on me." Outside, Rachel walked him to his car. "They've really bonded with you," she said, her tone thoughtful. "You're giving them something they desperately need right now. Hope." Duane nodded, his expression determined. "They're not just kids in a bad situation, Rachel. They're my responsibility now. I can't just walk away." Rachel placed a hand on his arm, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know you won't." As Duane drove away, the weight of the day settled heavily on him once more. The road ahead was filled with uncertainty, but one thing was clear. He wasn't giving up on Lila and June. They were counting on him, and he wasn't going to let them down. The following morning, Duane was on his way to the courthouse to meet with Catherine's legal team. His mind churned with thoughts about the previous day. Lila and June's vulnerability, Catherine's determined promise to change, and the evidence that could turn the case in her favor. Duane knew that this day would be pivotal, not only for Catherine but for her children as well. As he arrived at the courthouse, he was greeted by Rachel, who was already waiting near the entrance with a stack of documents in her hands. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her tone both reassuring and serious. "It's going to be a long day." Duane nodded, his expression firm. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's make sure we do everything we can for them." Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Catherine was seated with her attorney at one end of the room, her face pale but composed. She looked up as Duane entered, her eyes meeting his with a flicker of gratitude. The prosecution was already preparing their case, their table stacked with files and a laptop displaying slides they intended to present. Duane took his seat in the gallery, his large frame barely fitting into the narrow wooden bench. Rachel sat beside him, her presence a steadying force. The proceedings began with the prosecution laying out their case against Catherine. They emphasized her history of neglect, the conditions of the home, and her association with Dennis. While we understand Miss Holson has faced significant personal challenges, the prosecutor argued, her repeated failures to provide a safe environment for her children cannot be overlooked. Catherine's attorney countered with evidence of her recent efforts to turn her life around. He highlighted her willingness to enter rehabilitation, the support she had received from Duane, and the absence of her fingerprints on the evidence found in the teddy bear. "Miss Holson is not without fault," the attorney admitted, "but she is committed to change. Her children deserve a chance to be reunited with a mother who is working tirelessly to become the parent they need." As the arguments continued, Duane couldn't help but notice how Catherine's shoulders stiffened each time the prosecutor spoke. She was holding herself together, but barely. When it came time for testimony, the prosecution called Rachel to the stand. She spoke with calm authority, detailing the neglect she had observed but also acknowledging Catherine's recent steps toward improvement. "The children are deeply bonded with their mother," Rachel said, "and while the situation has been far from ideal, I believe that with the right support, Catherine can provide a stable and loving home for them." Next, it was Duane's turn. He rose from the bench, his towering presence commanding attention as he approached the witness stand. After taking the oath, he began to recount the events of the past few days. He described finding Lila at the store, learning about their living conditions, and his conversations with Catherine at the hospital. "I've seen firsthand how much Catherine loves her children," Duane said, his deep voice steady and sincere. "She's made mistakes, but she's willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I believe in second chances, and I believe in her." The courtroom was silent as Duane finished his testimony. Even the prosecutor seemed momentarily at a loss for words. As Duane returned to his seat, he felt the weight of Catherine's gaze on him. When he glanced her way, she mouthed a simple, heartfelt, "Thank you." The judge called for a brief recess before delivering the verdict. Duane and Rachel stepped outside, the cool morning air a welcome relief from the tension inside. "You did well in there," Rachel said, her tone encouraging. "Your testimony could make all the difference." "I hope so," Duane replied, his gaze fixed on the courthouse doors. "They deserve a shot at being a family again." When the court reconvened, everyone returned to their seats, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. The judge, a stern-faced woman with sharp eyes, addressed the courtroom. She acknowledged the complexities of the case, citing both Catherine's failures and her recent efforts to improve. "This court does not take lightly the decision to separate children from their parent," the judge said, her voice measured. "Miss Holson has demonstrated a willingness to address her shortcomings and work toward a better future for her children. However, the safety and well-being of Lila and June remain our top priority." The judge then outlined her ruling. Catherine would retain temporary custody of her children under strict conditions. She was to complete a rehabilitation program, attend weekly counseling sessions, and undergo regular check-ins from social services. The court also required that Lila and June remain at Sunnybrook Children's Home until Catherine could provide proof of her progress. The decision was met with mixed emotions, relief that Catherine had been given a chance, tempered by the knowledge that the road ahead would be far from easy. As the courtroom emptied, Duane approached Catherine. She was clutching the court's paperwork, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't have to," Duane replied, his tone firm but kind. "Just focus on being the best mom you can be. That's all the repayment I need." Catherine nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "I will. I promise." As Duane left the courthouse, he felt a mixture of relief and determination. The battle wasn't over, but today had been a victory. One step closer to giving Lila and June the future they deserved. And Duane, in his heart, knew he would be there every step of the way. Duane arrived at Sunnybrook Children's Home late in the afternoon, the sun casting a golden glow over the peaceful Victorian house. He parked his car and took a moment to gather his thoughts, reflecting on the events of the day. The court's decision was a step forward, but he knew the real work had only just begun. Inside, Ethan greeted him with a warm smile and led him to the children's room. "They've been asking about you," Ethan said softly, gesturing toward the door. As Duane entered, Lila and June immediately lit up at the sight of him. Lila ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Duane, did you see Mommy?" she asked, her voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. Duane crouched down to her level, meeting her wide, curious eyes. "I did," he said gently. "She's doing much better. She told me to tell you that she loves you very much, and that she's working hard so you can all be together again." Lila nodded solemnly, her small face serious as she processed his words. June, too young to fully understand, toddled over with his teddy bear in hand, babbling happily. Duane picked him up, holding the boy close. The warmth of the children's trust filled him with renewed determination. "Are you hungry?" he asked, looking at both of them. Lila nodded eagerly, and Duane smiled. "Let's find something good to eat." In the dining room, Duane helped the children with their dinner, chatting with them about their day. Lila's laughter rang out as she recounted a story about playing with the other kids at Sunnybrook. It was a small moment of normalcy, but to Duane, it was monumental, a glimpse of the happiness these children deserved. After dinner, he helped them with a bedtime routine, reading them a story as they snuggled under their blankets. When they finally drifted off to sleep, Duane quietly left the room, his heart full but heavy with the responsibility he felt toward them. Ethan met him in the hallway, his expression thoughtful. "You've made quite an impression on them," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "Lila keeps saying she wants to grow up to be strong like you." Duane smiled softly, his gaze drifting toward the closed door of the children's room. "They're strong on their own," he replied. "I'm just here to remind them of that." As he made his way back to his car, Duane's phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "I've just spoken with Catherine," she said, her tone a mix of relief and hope. "She's starting her rehabilitation program tomorrow. She sounded determined, Duane, like she's ready to fight for her family." Duane felt a wave of pride for Catherine. "That's good to hear," he said. "Let me know if there's anything she needs." Over the next few weeks, Duane remained a constant presence in the children's lives. He visited them at Sunnybrook, bringing small gifts and spending time with them. He also checked in on Catherine's progress, offering her encouragement as she navigated the challenges of her recovery. Slowly but surely, the pieces of their fractured family began to come together. Catherine worked tirelessly in her program, her determination fueled by the thought of reuniting with her children. Meanwhile, Lila and June thrived at Sunnybrook, their days filled with laughter and learning. One evening, as Duane was reading Lila a bedtime story, she looked up at him with her wide, trusting eyes. "Do you think Mommy will come home soon?" she asked. Duane paused, considering his words carefully. "I think she's doing everything she can to make that happen," he said gently. "And I know she loves you and June more than anything in the world." Lila smiled, her small hand reaching out to hold his. "Thank you for helping us, Duane," she said softly. "You're like a superhero." Duane chuckled, his heart swelling with emotion. "You know what, Lila? I think you're the real superhero." As the days turned into weeks, the family's situation continued to improve. Catherine completed her first phase of rehabilitation and began working with a counselor to rebuild her life. With Duane's support, she also enrolled in a job training program determined to create a stable home for her children. The court monitored her progress closely, and each positive step brought her closer to regaining custody. Finally, the day arrived when Catherine was allowed a supervised visit with her children at Sunnybrook. Duane was there to witness the reunion, his heart full as he watched Lila and June run into their mother's arms. The room was filled with tears and laughter, the bond between them as strong as ever despite the challenges they had faced. In the months that followed, Catherine proved her commitment to change. With Duane's continued support and guidance, she rebuilt her life piece by piece. When the court finally granted her full custody of Lila and June, it was a moment of triumph for everyone involved. At the small celebration held at Sunnybrook, Catherine hugged Duane tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You did the hard work," Duane replied, his voice steady. "I was just here to cheer you on." As the family left Sunnybrook to start their new life together, Duane stood at the gate, watching them go. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had made a difference in their lives. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had been worth every moment. For Duane, it was a reminder of the power of compassion and the importance of standing up for those in need. And, as he turned to leave, he carried with him the knowledge that this family's story was just beginning, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future. And so, what started as a simple act of compassion turned into a life-changing journey for everyone involved. This story reminds us that even small acts of kindness can make a world of difference. What would you do in a situation like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know how this story inspired you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of hope and humanity.